Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack for Business podcast.
I'm going to keep this high level, but really talking about today is messaging and grant funding and how the two are closely related, and really what your brand is saying really reflects on what you're saying in a grant application. A little bit more about me. Vanessa Burns, pronoun she, her, from Vanessa Burns Grant Consulting. I am a few things. Number one, I am a bit of an adventure seeker. In 2024, I trekked around Nepal for 6 weeks. I did 3.5 weeks on the Everest Three Passes trek and got to the altitude of 20,000 feet. It was a lesson in resilience. The hike is rated 9 out of 10 out of difficulty. I did not know that until a few days before going into the trek. But I finished and I lived to tell the tale. And it was really an eye-opening experience to visit that part of the world I'd never been. And I would love to go back. On the far right, because we all like pets, is my dog Arthur, who is a border collie turning 5 in May. And he is my therapist, my employee, my roommate, everything. And I also have 2 lovely daughters, Olivia and Lily, who are actually 27 and 22, who are lovely adults out on their own doing the thing. The middle image I'm very, very proud of. It's the Grant Professional Certification accreditation. I'm basically like the CPA of the grant world. I'm one of 6 in Canada to hold this designation. So I'm very happy about that. I put that off for 3.5 years because of test anxiety, ADHD, name it. And I passed the exam, the 6-hour exam, this past December. So I was very happy about that. So I'm one of 6 accredited GPCs in Canada, and I'm also the GPC ambassador for Canada. So if anybody works in the grant field and is looking to be accredited, like a CPA or a PMP, that's what I am, and that's what I promote. All right, let's get into it. Scattered reality. What do I mean by that? Basically, what happens when people don't understand what you're trying to say? What I find when I talk to a lot of folks is I talk to a lot of people and I say to them, tell me about your business, tell me about your organization. And they can't. They really go on and on and on. And I'm not understanding what they're saying. And I'm really trying to get them to a point where they can succinctly talk about what they do, because honestly, they have to be clear when it comes to writing grant applications. So really, when you're not clear, you have confused folks. They don't get what you do. And they don't really want to align themselves with you. They can't champion you. They technically don't want to buy from you. And don't want to give you the money. And rejected applications are generally declined because the funder can't understand what you're trying to align yourself with in terms of funding. They're not seeing the correlation between you and what they want you to do with the money. So a lot of that comes from that rejected application. And the other one too is what I call the guessing game exhaustion. So really, you're putting all these applications in. We just had a case in point with the Trillium Foundation 6 times, and you're wondering, why aren't we getting the money? Why is the message not landing with a particular funder? And so really what we're going to walk through today is really on the surface is, your messaging and branding, then how does that relate into the grant space? You're kind of moving from a scattered to a more strategic way of looking at reality when it comes to grants. So when you look at your brand, so when I say to you, what is your business, or what is your not-for-profit? You may think you're saying something, but when you're talking to someone, it's not coming out very clearly. So there's a little bit of a gap. You're not really building that trust, right? When it comes to what you say you do and what someone is hearing, what you say you do. So you're losing that trust, which at the end of the day, you're technically losing grant funding because of that. So you really want to make sure that when you're talking about business or talking about what you do, that you drop the jargon, right? You don't use all like big words, all those acronyms, industry speak. You could be talking to someone, really someone who knows nothing about you. So you want to make sure that you're clear. Same as with a grant application. When you're doing a grant application, they don't know who you are. They've never seen you before, unless you're reapplying, but chances are they've never seen you before. So you really have to be clear on what you do and who you are. So really define them first. Right? So you want to make sure that you spell the acronym, then put the acronym, and then you can use the acronym after that. But honestly, people are reviewing all kinds of applications. If you don't stand out, you won't get funded. The other thing I find too is people are all talking, we do this and we do that, and we're great at this and great at that, and blah, 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 blah. But they're not really saying, what transformation are you doing? What problem are you solving? What is your, why is your solution the best solution? Not we do this, but why do you do this? And how do you do this? And how does this affect the community you're doing it in? So really, features are always over outcomes. And the same goes with, some grant applications. They want to see the transformation you're doing with your clients, not so much all these features and benefits that you're doing in your business. And then the other thing is, the everything to everyone. And I call this kind of that throw the spaghetti at the wall and hope something sticks syndrome. It's the same in grants. Everybody says, we got to apply for everything that comes our way. We got to, put all these applications in. You don't, right? You don't. You want to really appeal to those funders that you align with. And so trying to be everything to everybody doesn't work in business, and it doesn't work in the grant space either. So you really want to appeal to the audiences that you align with and that you fit with. So we need to stop throwing that spaghetti at the wall, because frankly, nothing's going to stick. You want to make sure that you're throwing, you know, low quality against the wall with good sticking power, so it will stick. So honestly, don't try and be everything to everybody, and don't try and apply for everything either, because nothing will stick at the end of the day. When it comes to saying yes, in terms of, funding and grant applications, when it comes to, you're looking at two things: the client perspective and a funder's perspective. So when you're talking about a client, the client wants a solution, right? We all have things in our business, we're all providing some kind of a solution. But when you're talking to a client, a potential client, if they don't know what the heck you're selling or what problem you're solving for them or how you can take away their pain and all these things, they're not going to buy from you, right? It's the same kind of with a funder. Like, a funder wants what they're trying to do. They want to see kind of that impact. They want to see that the solution you are proposing is actually working. And how do they know that it's actually working, right? I mean, if you're using kind of vague language, we are the best. Yeah, so how do they know you're the best, right? Do you have testimonials? Do you have results that say, the work you're doing is, doing this in the community, or doing this? It's like, how do you know what you're doing is the best? So, being vague, using vague sentences, not backing up what you're saying, really doesn't get you funded. And honestly, when you look at a grant application, you have probably like maybe sometimes like 250 words, sometimes 500 characters, believe it or not, to say what you do. And if they don't understand what you do in that first part of an application, you're already at a disadvantage. You're already kind of leaning towards the rejection pile. So the key really is to make sure that the messaging that you're putting forward is clear, for the very reason that you have maybe 20 seconds, 25 seconds, 40 seconds, whatever, depending on the reading speed, to tell people what you do. If they don't get it in a grant application, you're not going to get the funding. So the key really is to make sure that you're clear. And if you're not 100% sure, then review it with someone. Try your 250 word pitch and try it out with someone and see if they go, I totally get what you're doing. They're kind of going, hey, that's a red flag. You might want to rework that. So honestly, biggest thing you can do is be clear and concise, and, practice with like 250 words and see if you can actually get, what you're doing and what problem you're trying to solve in that length of time in a clear and concise manner, because that really will position you for a yes from a funder. If a funder can't see how A, you're aligned with them, or B, what you're trying to do, A, and C, what solution you have, then you're not going to be getting any funding from anybody. So in terms of grants, when I say like the word grant, and I said this in my introduction, most people kind of go, ooh, they get this yucky look on their face. I mean, it takes time, not sure to look. Honestly, it doesn't have to be a guessing game, right? And some people feel that grants are kind of that impossible space. We don't know how to get into this space because it looks very complicated, like government speak and all this other stuff. And it's always changing and we're not sure how to get into it, or, where do we find these opportunities? But really, I mean, that's why I say don't try and be everything to everybody, right? I mean, if you understand what your business is and you understand where you want to go in terms of grant funding. Now, when you look at grants for businesses, grants are for growth, right? Grants for not-for-profits are for impact. If you're looking at your business, how do you want to grow? Do you want to export? Do you want to hire? I was going to say, do you want to fire? No, but you want to hire, you want to export, do you want to build something new, research element? Those are very much like the pillars of business grants, training, that type of stuff. When you look at not-for-profit grants, it's really impact-based. right? What impact are you making in the community? I mean, we heard from someone, today that talked about, feeding kids and hunger and that type of thing. What impact is your program making? The funders want to see impact and align them. So businesses is very much growth, and not for profit is very much impact. But honestly, when you sort of know what you're doing and you see the keywords, so if you're looking at, oh, we want to hire someone, we're going to look at hiring grants. We're not going to look at every grant that's coming out. We're going to specifically look for those hiring grants. And that's when you start really honing in on those keywords and being a lot more specific in terms of what you're looking for. I like to say with grants too, like I use like free money. And I mean, yes, you don't have to pay it back, but is it really free? It comes with things attached to it. We heard a couple of things today, but in grants, they're not going to take a percentage of your company, but they are going to ask you to basically spend the money in the way you said you were going to spend it, right? So if you said you're going to do this with the money, then you do this. Because what happens is if you don't spend the money like you say you're going to spend the money, you don't want it, you might have to pay it back. And we don't want that, right? So you really have to look at that free money and say, okay, I can get the money. I don't have to pay it back, but do I have the capacity to deliver what I say I'm going to do? So if I'm going to I want to bring on a student, on a hiring grant, only 50% of their wages are going to be covered. Am I able to cover the other 50%? Right? Is that doable for my business? Or if you're a not-for-profit, I hear all the time, we're going to create a brand new project just to get the grant money. Really? Do you have the capacity to run this whole new project? So you really want to say, like, grants, yeah, free money, but they do have something attached to them. And they really want, funders want to see you succeed and they want to see you, be able to complete the project, but you want to make sure you're applying for things that you're able to complete and you're going to be able to spend the money in the way you said you're going to spend it. So the final thing there really is in terms of back to that problem is, you've seen a grant, you've simplified the process, you understand the keywords, you have the capacity to do so, but then, really there's that red tape again, right? What are the questions asking me? How do I sort of formulate what I want to tell the grant funder? But really, at the end of the day, it follows a formula. There's always going to be a problem, right? There's always going to be, what is the problem? Why do you need this money? And that's a really important question to ask yourself. Why do you need grant money? Right? Why don't you just get a loan or go for a line of credit or get an investment? Why do you need specifically grant money? And most people go for grant money because it's kind of seen as maybe the easier way. They're out there, they're available. But you know what? There's always a lot of problems trying to get through understanding what they really want you to do. So what you have to do is really cut through that red tape of grants. And when you actually get into getting, applying for a grant is again, use that simple language. Don't make it really complicated. You don't have to be all fancy dancy and all this other stuff when you apply for grants. Keep it simple, right? Keep it on the level. Make sure that people understand what you're saying. But always remember what problem you're trying to solve and align it with the grant. Because honestly, if you can write a grant application, you're not spending time really, trying to make answers fit the question, that's a red flag that maybe not the right opportunity. If you can fit the circle into the circle, that's great. If you're trying to fit the circle into the square, not so hot. So with grants, really demystify that guessing game and make it feel like grants, yes, they are possible. We understand the landscape. We understand why we're looking for funding. We understand that, grants come with some strings attached that we have to be able to do programs and deliver what we say. But we also understand that as the applicant, we have the capability to actually, speak in plain language and let the funder understand what we're trying to do. So in that way, they will be more interested in what we're trying to do and give us money. So that's what I call kind of that demystifying the grant guessing game. Yes, grants are out there. They are a little bit complicated, but if you break down the process, it really doesn't become as a panic situation as you may have thought it was in the first place. It doesn't mean you should apply. And I like to say not every grant is a good grant and not all money is good money. Like there's people that I'll never work with, right? There's clients we will never work with. There's funders we never work with either. And honestly, the reason we say that is because you really have to be, you need to be a little bit selective, right? And so in this case, what I like to look at is the 3-point filter. So industry and demographic fit. Does the grant support your sector, right? Does the grant support your community? Does the grant support your business profile? And in that case, as I say, if all you leave from today is, one big tip, if you see a grant that's advertised, read the beeping guide. grant has an applicant guide. Take the time to read it. It's basically your Bible to how to fill out an application. It could be 70 pages. I've read those for clients. It could be a little blurb on their website, but every grant has a guideline. So make sure you read those. And that'll make sure, and that'll tell you if it's a fit or not, right? If it's not a fit, don't apply. Simple as that. And again, project alignment. Does your grant align with your current growth plan or potential? Does it align with what your project wants to do? Like if you have to, sway from your mission, if you have to create something just to make it fit, then that's a red flag. And honestly, funders are savvy, right? They can spot that. So really make sure that when you're looking at funding opportunities that you're able to fit what they're asking for, and you're able to deliver on what they want you to deliver. That whole alignment piece. So applicant guide and alignment, the two A's that are really, really important when it comes to grants. And then time, right? I mean, I've written grants that have taken way more time for very little. So is it worth your effort? If you're writing, for 40 hours of work for $5,000, it's probably easier to, go and get a sale, right? Honestly, like that's a lot of work. So you want to make sure that the ROI is there for grant funding and your time. So, grants do take time to apply. I mean, there are AI tools out there now to help you through applications, but there's still all the pre-work to do, right? You still have to put your ideas in place, your projects, the whole sort of why you need money type of deal. And AI is there to help you sort of craft the things. But honestly, just take a look at the ROI for the amount of time you're putting in, the amount of money you may be getting back. Is it actually worth it? And look at what the final reporting requirements are in a grant and see if it's really something you want to get into, because some of them get very, very complicated. Want to make sure that the ROI around a grant application is definitely worth your time. So in terms of next steps, 3 steps to be more clear when it comes to funding is really, take these away with you from this little presentation is refine that elevator pitch. 1 to 2 sentences. Show your impact. Test it on someone outside your industry and really, make sure they give you an honest opinion. You want to make sure you're talking to someone who's going to say, you know what? Not really clear with what you're saying, and then, giving you suggestions on how it could be clear. So don't be afraid to try it out on someone who really knows not a lot about your business or your organization. Audit your assets. I mean, funders look at your website, right? They'll look at they ask you to list these things sometimes. And so you want to make sure that, the messaging is consistent between all platforms. Because if you're saying something on one platform, you got something over here and you got something going on over here, you want consistency. That all comes down to branding, right? You want your brand to be consistent on all platforms. So when someone is looking at an application from you, they go to your website, it's consistent. They go to your social media, it's consistent. So that's really the importance. And the words you're using and the language you're using is consistent as well. And that's for AI, garbage in, garbage out, right? You want to make sure that what you're getting, if you're using an AI tool, is actually giving you what's reflective of your business or your profit. If it's a whole different look and feel and language and the way that you're talking in words, it doesn't really jive on the rest of how your brand is looking. And funders do look at that. And then third is, I say, like to build a grant calendar. So when you start finding opportunities, start building yourself out some kind of a schedule or a calendar so you can be a little more proactive as opposed to reactive when it comes to grant opportunities. So if you see a grant that, or maybe it just closed but looked interesting, start putting it on some kind of a tracker sheet. And then you can kind of start building up your own little library of grant funding. Now, there are lots of tools you can research grants with. There's like Grant Connect, Grant Advance, Grant Station for profit side. And then on the for-profit side, you have Pocketed, which is based out of BC. You have TD Bank has a partnership with Fundica, and they have a free tool you can use. You basically put in the parameters of your business and up pop some results you can look at in terms of grant funding. So honestly, you can get into kind of the research weeds, but at the end of the day, if you're going to start tracking, grant opportunities, then you really have to have someone who's in charge of that. So you can have all the nice tracking systems in the world, but make sure that it's either yourself or someone from your team that's really taking the time to be able to track these opportunities and think, oh yeah, the Can Export grant is open. Now it usually closes in May. I better get my application in. Canada Summer Jobs is open usually around the end of the year with the closing date, usually about December. We need to get our application in. So really, you start being a little bit, again, more proactive in terms of grants, because when you're kind of in that reactive space, then everything is like, oh my gosh, it's always a panic situation. So really the reason, I exist is that, purpose as opposed to panic is you want to be proactive as opposed to reactive when it comes to grants. So to conclude, basically, clarity is your most valuable currency when it comes to grant. If you don't have that clear brand message, you're not going to, that's where it's going to fall a little bit short. So to to recap on what we talked about was basically you want to make sure that funders are able to understand what you do in basically the first, section of the grant, that 250 characters, whatever it is. I run an exercise in longer workshops where everybody talks for a minute. I stop a timer after a minute and I say, that's 250 words. You've gone over the word limit, right? So you want to really be concise. You want to make sure you find grants that fit, right? You want to make sure that you're applying for things that fit what you're looking to do. You're not looking to fit that circle into the square. You're looking to make sure that things align. And that was one of the words I want you to remember is alignment. Same as applicant guide, right? You find a grant you want to apply for, read the applicant guide first. Go through everything, go through the eligibility, everything, and make sure you get that down. In terms of action, you want to make sure that you're in a position where someone's going to say yes to you. Grant writing and grants are persuasive writing, no different than selling to a client. It's the same thing. We're persuasive all the time in our business. We're persuasive all the time in not-for-profits asking for money. So you want to make sure that you're starting off on the right foot and being able to position yourself to get a yes. And remember that, funding and grants, it's a marathon. Sometimes it takes time. I mean, sometimes it may take you 6 times to get an application and someone to say yes. I always tell people you have to start somewhere, right? Put in an application. It doesn't have to be the best work you've ever done, but, start, working and playing a little bit in that space. Then, start seeing what happens. And if you get rejected, hell, I get rejected. I've been rejected 4 times in one day. I'm a professional, right? I mean, don't worry about rejection. It happens, but learn from rejection and try and figure out, maybe I'm not aligning myself properly, right? Maybe there's something missing that I'm not sure of. But honestly, it's a marathon, not a sprint. If you think about funding and you want to get into the space, get started, but have the expectation that it may take you a little bit to ramp up. But if you do win a grant, and I have an example of someone who's never applied for a grant before, and they walked away with $600,000 from the federal government. You never know, right? So don't be afraid of the space. Be proactive instead of reactive, and let's change it from, being a panic situation to being a more purposeful situation when it comes to grants. That's my LinkedIn profile where I'm very active, and I also have a Calendly link there, and I like to always offer folks a 30-minute conversation with myself if you want to explore things a little bit further or have any questions about the grant space.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.